I feel like music just touches people's humanity in general. And so I try to do as much of bringing that in as possible, and it makes things more exciting in the learning experience.
This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good morning, Kyle Wagner. Previously, episode 609 of the 12-Minute Convos podcast. It's been just 2 years, 10 months, 19 days, 9 hours, and just about 15 minutes since we last recorded our conversation.
Whatever your passion is, you're on this planet to fulfill one singular purpose. I really believe that. Once you find that purpose, stop at nothing to achieve that, and it will bring you and everyone else the greatest joy.
That was then. This is now. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I am excellent as can be. I remember our conversation just like it was yesterday. Thankfully for technology, right? I could just click a button and hear that conversation and be transported, if you would, across the timeline way back in 2016, November specifically, the 10th. You're doing some pretty amazing things. Let's get an update. What's going on in your world today?
Yeah, I'm over in Hong Kong right now, and I'm sure if you're archiving this, I mean, this is during an interesting time in Hong Kong's history with a lot of protests going on. But that's not exactly the avenue that I'm in, but just as a perspective of where I'm at. I'm still in education. My journey is kind of taking me over here to explore how to support schools in developing and growing 21st century learners, or learners of the future for that matter. So working with a lot of schools over here, international schools, and continuing to put online courses and books together to help support them.
Yeah, when we spoke, you just wrote a book, The Power of Simple. So let's get into that, The Power of Simple first, and how that book and writing that book has transformed your life and the lives of others.
Yeah, well, I think it's helped because everyone has, I mean, as you get these 12-minute stories, I think everybody has a story that's worth sharing. And my particular story was helping a school to kind of build a program from the ground up. And so it's just a small slice of what's going on in the revolution of, I want to call it the revolution of education, because that's having to change so rapidly, and schools are really needing to do a lot and change what it looked like maybe when you or I went to school. So it's been transformative in that it's really connected me, I think, to the schools and the programs that really want to make these big shifts.
You have a great heart for people, and more so for children. You're impacting the next generation and the generation just after that, because these children will therefore be the parents of those children. Do you look at it like that, or are you in it for who you are and just contributing to society from that perspective?
I think that's a good question. I am future kind of oriented, so I will say that I do think about the future decision makers or citizens, which are going to be our kids who are going to be inheriting the earth. But I also feel like, as well, it's just my personality. I think I'm quite people oriented, and I find kids are very raw and authentic and real, especially at the middle school age, which I have a quite affinity for. So I think that's what's kind of drawn me into it. It's wanting to make an impact, and then also working with people who are just genuine and authentic.
Now, when we spoke, you didn't have children, specifically birthed from your loins, if you would, right? But do you still do not have children?
I don't. I do in the next few years plan.
Okay.
I am on that kind of direction to have kids of my own. I feel blessed, to be honest, because I have this opportunity to work with kids, all day, and then also have an opportunity to pursue other kind of things I like to pursue, which is book writing and music, have a band, and, I'm able to pursue traveling. And I know that might slow down a bit having the kids.
Yeah. It's intriguing, right? It's like the necessary sacrifice at this particular moment, isn't it? It's part of the decision to fully be involved with other children that takes you away from this opportunity as well to have children. But it's impactful, I would say, probably even more than having children, if I could say, right? My opinion, because you get to have like thousands of children over the course of your life, right? And
Yeah.
specifically at a very tender age, and an age where what they learn then impacts who they are. So I'm not saying that it's less or it's more, but it's definitely a decision that takes and has consequences to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think in terms of impact, that's what I'm looking at right now. And I feel as an educator, especially now working with teachers across many different areas, I feel like the change can be exponential because ultimately, if I can help support teachers in what they're trying to do, which is now the direction I'm going with trainings and helping to make learning real for students, then it's going to impact a lot more. Do you have kids yourself?
I do. I have 3 kids, and there's not room for any other children in my life. Like, like my nephew comes by, and it's like a compact moment. I'm on my limits then, and that's me specifically. Of course, there are other individuals that can do that, but with everything that's going on, it's challenging for me to measure how you do what you do. But I understand, again, within the compartmentalization of the way you're doing it, seems to be impactful. Now, the music side of things that you're doing, does that help with the educational side of what you do as well?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. And you don't necessarily see the one-to-one correlation initially when you get into education. But I had a mentor, I was struggling my first couple of years, I think as any teacher would. And he's like, why don't you bring your keyboard in and just play them a song? I'm like, but that has nothing to do with what I'm teaching them. Like, that won't make me the sage on the stage, And I was under this impression that you had to separate yourself from the kids. But I found when I did that, I became so much more accessible to them. And I feel like music just touches people's humanity in general. And so I've tried to do as much of bringing that in as possible. And it kind of makes things more exciting, I think, in the learning experience.
Of the 4 components that you went in there to help with, humanities, mathematics, sciences, and the Chinese language, which is your strongest?
Yeah, I think not Chinese. Before this phone call started, just an aside, I had my Chinese guide in teaching me Chinese. I'm still, still struggling. But I think humanities, and it's funny that you asked that question because I talked to a math science teacher, and he's of the opinion as well, even though his focus is math science, he says every project he starts from the humanities side of it, like the big question. If they're launching rockets, if they're launching a weather balloon, it's more than just let's report the weather or let's see how far this thing can shoot up in the air. It's the humanity of it all. Like, what can we explore? How will that help us? So yeah, I'm a humanities person, I would say, through and through.
Love it. Love it. Inquiring, exploring, creating. Another 3 core fundamentals. How have children reacted to the way they're being taught? Because of course they're not in a bubble, right? Like there are other children that are doing what was considered the standardized way of learning. How do they react when they're in that role where they're experiencing everything that you are teaching?
Yeah, we all had projects at some point that we did when we were kids, but it's different today because I just think knowledge is at kids' fingertips. That if you really engage students in an inquiry that's quite meaningful to them, and a lot of these inquiries are centering around these SDG or these big kind of UN global goals of global warming we have happening. We have governments that are being toppled and, rulers that are coming out that are being, if I can say so, fascist and not open-minded. And I think that these kids have an opportunity now and a platform to share that we didn't have necessarily in the past. Facebook and social media and YouTube. I mean, you take a girl like Greta Thunberg, who has now had the ability to single-handedly start this global strike and really help people be conscientious. I mean, that's one student who took that upon her hands. So I think when it comes to acquire, explore, create, I think the learning experiences that we can provide our students with now have to be integrated across curricular because information now is so fluid. So that's my take on that.
Well, yeah, the fluidity of your life's decisions and where it's taken you to today is a grand example and one that I'm both motivated by and inspired to share, in that you've made decisions that have aligned with where you are today and who you're helping and what you do and how you do that. So as your podcast accountability partner stepping in here, I'm checking in to say, hey, are you doing what you said you were going to be doing? it brings great joy, Kyle, to see that you are my friend. It is a great opportunity for me. In closing, Kyle Wagner, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
Your amazing audience. Well, I'll give you a plug, just simply that you're having these conversations. And it just started as just this idea of having conversations. And look what it's turned into for you. I'm not exactly the accountability partner, but I'll use that same phrase. I think you're really changing and shaking things up and getting people's stories out to the world. So kudos to you for that. And I hope it continues to go well.
I appreciate that. Again, amazing audience. Kyle Wagner. Kyle, a treasure, a pleasure. Thank you for being on what is inspired by 12-minute convos with Angel Jones. This podcast is produced by Pod Edits. Visit podedits.com for professional podcast publishing.